setting up the meeting for the custom streaming service. Okay, we are live.
Yeah.
And I'm here tonight with the wonderful and amazing Julie Witherell. So here's my question for you tonight, dear viewers. Do you find yourself struggling to deal with the piles of stuff around your home and office? Or are you constantly losing things like your keys, your phone, and your glasses? Feeling overwhelmed and like it's almost impossible to get anything done? If this sounds like you, stay tuned for tonight's show because I have a very special guest for you here. Julie Witherell, owner of Julie's Organizing Services, will be joining us tonight to talk not only about getting organized, but also about the links between disorganization and ADHD and even trauma. Welcome to Reclaim Your Radiance with Melanie Starr, your source for inspiration, motivation, and wisdom on your path to wellness, vitality, and growth. This is where together we are learning how to recognize, understand, and release old patterns in our bodies and minds that are keeping us stuck. This includes emotional and behavioral patterns that wreak havoc on our health. If you don't know me, my name is Melanie Starr, and I'm a life coach, master EFT tapping practitioner, a Reiki master and yoga teacher with more than 20 years of experience in the health and wellness field. I'm the creator of the Holistic Divorce Healing Method, a lifelong learner in the realm of holistic health and healing, and the host of this show. Please join me and my guests every week for a breath of fresh air and some new perspectives, techniques, and resources that you can apply to improve your health, upgrade your energy, and reclaim your radiance. In today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome Julie Witherell, a professional organizer with advanced training in ADHD, hoarding, and trauma in reference to organizing. She offers assessment, consultation, and hands-on home and office decluttering and organizing services in the Greater Halifax and East Hants areas here in Nova Scotia. She is also the founder of the ADHD and Neurodiverse Support and Advocacy Group Nova Scotia on Facebook. So you might want to head over to Facebook if you're not there already and join. Greetings, Julie, and welcome.
Thank you.
So what prompted you to decide to become a professional organizer?
Well, quite a few years ago, I went through a really difficult separation and divorce, and I was faced with downsizing big time. So while I was going through a lot of trauma from that divorce, I was having ADHD symptoms that just compiled other things that were going on. So I always considered myself pretty organized, but because of what was going on, I knew I needed to pay that much more attention to what I needed to get a hold of with my space and with my life to organize the direction that I was going to go in next. So it just seemed like a really good fit.
Okay. So, and just in reference to that, and I completely relate because I'm also divorced, and I also helped my mother downsize out of a big old house into a small, tiny apartment in recent years. And I really remember that in the early time after the divorce that I was completely overwhelmed by my stuff, what I had kept and brought with me. And it took me a really long time, and some of it just stayed in boxes for a long time, and eventually I just got rid of stuff. But it is overwhelming, and it just adds to the feeling that your stuff is like creeping in on you and you can't think. That's what happens to me is I started to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so like everything around me is overwhelming. It's just, it really adds to it. So, and speaking, you mentioned ADHD symptoms. So, and we've talked before about the connections between clutter and organization and ADHD. So I'm wondering if, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, if you can explain a little bit more about what ADHD is, because there's a concept, like when I think ADHD, my thought has always been like a 9-year-old boy causing a ruckus in the classroom, not paying attention to the teacher and that kind of thing. I don't think about it in terms of like middle-aged women who are trying to cope with their, who can't find their glasses or whatever it is, right? And so it's, and frankly, I've just recently, like, as I learn more about it, I'm starting to think, wow, I have some of these symptoms as well. I'm not sure if it's ADHD or if it's trauma, like, but it's the same effect. The same.
Yeah.
It's the same cure too. So
Yeah.
just if you want to fill us in a little bit about what those symptoms are so that people could maybe self-identify if
Yeah.
that's them.
For sure. So ADHD is defined medically as a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it's characterized by persistent patterns of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that interfere with your daily function and development. But as you said, like those, so you can be diagnosed with something completely different, but your symptoms are presenting that are coming up with ADHD, like trauma. So anything that kind of I find is like a jolt to your system, your nervous system, you're going to have a lot of those symptoms like brain fog and scattered thoughts and feeling overwhelmed, trouble getting started. So when I was going through my divorce, it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like, okay, I need to start getting rid of things and downsizing just to process it in my mind. It's such a big process. And some things you start with the easy things that feel like, okay, I can get rid of that. And then you feel a little bit lighter. And then you deal with the more heavier stuff, like the stuff that's tied to memories and emotions. And those
Right.
can go in a box and you might want to deal with them later. So it's a big process, but it does take time to get there. So procrastination is one of them. And then difficulty concentrating on those things are just some of the symptoms. And then women tend to mask that more than men. And as you mentioned, like boys were more diagnosed. It
Right.
started for boys. Yeah. So then women are still not usually diagnosed until later years because it's known to be genetic. So maybe their child gets diagnosed with ADHD and then they think, oh, maybe I have ADHD too. And
Right.
then if you're between like 41 and 55 is like the range, your hormones are going to fluctuate with your estrogen and
Right.
progesterone, which is also going to, if you already have ADHD, it can increase your symptoms or it can create symptoms like that. So we're constantly juggling a lot as it is, right? And then dealing with that
Right.
on top of it can feel very overwhelming. So women tend to mask those feelings and they're more easily to feel very overwhelmed and very scattered by simple tasks that feel very
Right.
chaotic.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, it kind of becomes a perfect storm,
Mhm.
in a way when I think about women in our age group where they're dealing with maybe menopause and divorce at the same time.
Mhm.
And whatever, like there may be, I know for you, I think that your divorce prompted also a career change for you too, right? So there's going to be a lot going on for women our age. So
Mhm.
um why so we have these symptoms, but why does this affect the ability to stay organized?
So regulating your attention. So women, well, and men that have ADHD, it's harder. So inattention, it's not that you can't pay attention, but you have a harder time regulating that.
Okay.
So we're more easily distracted by what's around us. So if you have a lot of things around you, it's going to distract you from the things that you need to focus on. But then at the same time, having the right way to organize will affect that. So having things that are clearly labeled or clear bins that things have a home. So depending on like how you prefer to organize really helps. Because I find a lot of my ADHD clients, they like to have everything kind of in front of them so they know what's what and where it is, but then it can still feel overwhelming and scattered
Yeah.
and you're still trying to it's still a long thought process of completing a task. So if you have something like all your spices in one clear container where you can see them, it's easy to just grab that container and go through it, and then when you're done you can just throw it back in. So sometimes not always being things being perfectly labeled, but just it being like imperfectly perfect ways
Right.
of organizing are really going to help.
So is it that aspect of not being able to like get organized in the first place though? Like if you have ADHD tendencies, is it just that aspect of overwhelm? Like I can see all this stuff, but I don't, it doesn't interest me. There's
Right.
that, it doesn't interest me. I don't want to do that. And our tendency to like go to the shiny object that's way more interesting. And
Yeah.
that will hold our attention. And then the things that seem onerous
Mm.
are, we resist them.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So, there's a psychologist that William Dawson that defined INCUP as an acronym, and those are
Okay.
things that motivate you. So, if you start to, so you might have ADHD and you feel like you're constantly trying to organize everything, but you're not getting anywhere. So
Right.
that's where, yeah, having a professional organizer come in or like a buddy system can help, so that you take the time to focus on that one thing and complete it. So when you're interested in it, so finding ways that you're interested in, if you're not interested, how can you make it interesting? So that might be assess
Right. So
your
like I
values.
go in my kitchen and I go, oh my goodness. So like my spices are, like you mentioned spices, my spices are a disaster. It's demotivating to cook. Um,
Right.
so are these like what other kinds of challenges is someone with ADHD typically going to face in terms of managing their possessions and their space? And then I'm curious as to, well, to me, it feels like if you're chaotic inside, you're going to be chaotic outside. So I'm
Right.
just wondering, like, the impact of this on the individual and their overall mental health and their overall well-being.
Yeah, your nervous system is like heightened. So when you go to organize, you could all of a sudden have this wave of like a stress response, which can be like from
Okay.
a multiple, amount of things like trauma.
Yeah.
And so then you become overwhelmed and it's just too complicated and it just feels too much. It's overwhelming. So then you get distracted and you're like, oh, I'm going to go do this other thing because maybe it feels I'll be able to accomplish that and I'll feel more better about getting that done. And then you go to attempt that, and then you find yourself in the same situation. And then you
Right.
get the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So then it feels like you're never really getting anything completed.
So then you're going to have a problem with your dopamine
Right. Yeah.
because you're not getting that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you're like, oh, I feel like I can't do anything. So your sense of self-efficacy is going
Mhm.
to come down and down.
Right.
It could
Yeah.
actually have an effect on your overall confidence.
Oh, big time. Big time.
Right. Or your
Yeah.
sense of, am I okay? I keep losing my keys.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? And people may be starting to be hard on themselves, which is
Definitely.
never going to be helpful. It's never
Yes. Yeah. And that's a lot of times the case. Like when I go into someone's home, they're way more harder on themselves and they think, oh, I must be the most disorganized person you've ever met. And that's never really the
That's
case.
never the case.
Yeah. It's just they really believe that because they feel so overwhelmed, they're feeling all the symptoms of feeling
Yes.
disorganized. But they just need like some steps to
So
get that
does
going.
being disorganized then and having, your maybe your all your stuff in your drawers is disheveled and maybe you've got your baskets of clean laundry you haven't folded yet and maybe there's dirty dishes stacked up in the kitchen, maybe your home office is a little bit of a disaster and your basement is piled up with boxes.
Mhm.
um, what effects does this have on the person's ability to actually tackle that then?
Yeah, it's very overwhelming because then it's an accumulation that feels like a giant pile of all the things. And then
Right,
all
because it just
the,
keeps going and going and going and then you try to dig into it but you're just scratching the surface.
yeah, yeah. And then you get distracted by whatever
Yeah.
thing comes up. And especially if it's something that holds a memory, then it's going to take a longer time to process. And you might have feelings that come up while you're organizing that. So,
And that would be a really big one in instances of divorce.
right.
It's
Yeah.
actually interesting. I do have a guide, and maybe that's what I'll share with as my free gift after this episode is I have a guide for steps for healing from divorce. And I think it's my third step is purge.
Mhm.
And it's purging items in your space that were part of your marriage.
Mhm.
So it might not necessarily be your wedding china. You might not want to part with that. But if you have bedding that you slept in with your former spouse, obviously photographs are highly sentimental and you may want to, store them somewheres or you might want to burn them. I know people who've done that.
Yeah.
But the emotional content of a cup that maybe, that you got, like gifts that you received
Mhm.
from your former partner, um, things that you bought together, furniture items or curio items like knickknacks and that kind of thing or art pieces. There's going to be a lot of emotional content with that and therefore a lot of resistance to letting it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
how do
learned
you support
this.
people? Are you able to support people that way? Or if they, I suppose if they were really stuck, they could come to someone like me who can help them deal with some of the underlying emotional problems that they're having, some of the, you know, emotional stuckness overall about moving on from the marriage. But like
Yeah.
on the ground, when you're with somebody, helping them deal with the stuff that they're trying to get organized, how do you do that? Like, how does that work?
So, excuse me, just to go back to what you said, yeah, so I have my training through the the Institute of Challenging Disorganization, and that's one of the things that they recommend, to have another person, like someone like a coach, healthcare professional, anyone to kind of help with the mental side of it, while having someone to come in and do professional organizing, to work hands one-on-one with you, is the best approach to getting through that stuff. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And then the um the other part was ways to tackle that, right?
Yeah. How do you help people tackle it? Like, what's the process? And like, if
So
someone wanted to do it on their own, like if they really want to try it on their own, they can see how far they get. But then also, like, what's the process of getting decluttered? Is there a step
um
by step kind of a way of approaching it?
yeah, building your confidence is huge. So sometimes that's and self-awareness too. Realizing your behaviors and symptoms when you're faced with those things, like how, if you're trying to organize something, what are the emotions? Like, you do a lot of that, recognizing, like, where is it in my body and how do I feel
Right.
about that, and starting from there, and then building on, well, what are my strengths that I can build from there, and then that's what I can come in and help them with. So reaching out, communicating with others, talking to other people that are also doing and interested in the same topics, is really going to build your self-confidence and make you feel that you're not alone, which is huge.
Right. Right.
So reaching out to a professional organizer like myself, then we can do an assessment, which might be on the phone, it might be through photos, or it might just be the day of when I show up. We'll do a walk around and talk about what works and what doesn't work. And then go through the stuff that's the challenging stuff, and it might be really heavy. We might start, depending on the situation, we might start where it's an easier task to build your confidence in it.
Right.
So then, because once you feel like, well, I didn't get it all done, and if you're feeling impulsive, you want to get it all done right away, and then you start to realize it's a process.
Right. It's a process.
um, yeah, but then you start to feel a little bit lighter once you start doing that process.
And do you go room by room? Is that sort of the overall methodology? Like
We
room
can
by room,
usually,
or all the
yeah,
closets first, or all the
the
all the
method that
first?
I really like to use and encourage my clients to do is start at one area of the room that you want to focus on, and work at one end, and then work your way around, rather than zigzag, because
Right.
that happen a lot with ADHD symptoms, right? You'll get distracted and, oh, I need to put this in this category over here, and then you get caught up trying to organize this when you haven't finished this. So you can just kind of do like it's a good enough job. I'm going to put it over here in this area of its home, and then we'll get to it as we get around to the other end. And then having things with you for your garbage, your recyclables, and anything that's going to be donated or anything that's going to be put away. And then if there's something that you're really not sure of, having in, like, maybe that's just a box that you're like, okay, I'm only going to keep what fills this box, and then go through it
Right.
later and make a decision on that. So I can help people by taking things out and bringing them to great places to donate it, where it goes to use and such too.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
I love what I do.
yeah, it sounds well, people must be really grateful, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where once they're started too, like they must get some momentum on their own, and then they're feeling more a stronger sense of self-efficacy, and I can do this. And then I don't know what kind of feedback you get from people, but it would seem to me that it could translate into other areas of life as well. Not
Yeah.
just keeping your stuff organized, but like your schedule organized, and like, oh, I can do things, I can learn things, I can change my patterns.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, with the kitchen spices, then, once you have that, like working with a client that's, we're going to organize our kitchen, who loves to bake or loves to cook, they're more motivated and excited to go do that task, which is going to
Right.
bring those endorphins and feel good about
Sure.
yourself because you got it done. And yeah, it just
So
makes life
there's
so much more easier.
so then there's more opportunity for fulfillment,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. So if you're like, you like to cook, or maybe you're an artist or a crafter, but you're like, oh my God, I can't even consider doing an art piece right now because I'd have to sort through that disastrous pile of
Mhm.
paints in grocery bags or whatever it is, whatever
Yeah.
your situation is. It'd be very
Yeah.
demotivating. So that's amazing. So how can people reach you, Julie?
They can reach me on my website. They can go straight there to get a free download, which is a mini guide for home and office organizing for individuals with ADHD. So there we break down the what to identify what helps motivate you and what strengths to build on and how to apply them with some really simple tips. So it could just be like using a timer. I have one here when you're
Oh,
challenging
nice.
yourself. So
Yep.
if it's something you really don't want to do, like the laundry, right? A very mundane task that's not
Mhm.
exciting at all.
Yep.
You can put on the timer, say, I'm just going to work on the laundry for 30 minutes folding or an hour. I'm going to put on music, a podcast, stuff like that. So,
So
yeah.
what's your website address? It's juliesorganizingservices.ca, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's all underscore, it's all lowercase, no dots or underscores. And
Right.
Julie is Julies,
Yes.
organizationservices.ca, not .com.ca.
Yes.
So that's amazing. So thank
Yeah.
you so much, Julie. This has been a
Thanks for
lot of
having
fun
me.
and I'm feeling more motivated and we'll have to get together sometime and take
Yay.
my kitchen.
Yes.
It would be great to, I used to be such a keen cook too. I would just love cooking. So I've been
Good.
not
Yeah,
as
it's great to get
keen.
back to the things that you love doing, right? Like
Right,
that's
that
what
help you
it's all
feel
about.
grounded and help you feel like
Yeah,
yourself, right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Julie, and thank you, viewers, for your interest in this topic. Please feel free to share your thoughts about this episode in the comments and share it with any of your friends who are also maybe struggling with their stuff and they're looking to, improve their energy and uplift themselves in 2024. So I also invite you to download my free guide, which I will put in the comments a little later. This is going to be my guide for healing from divorce because there is quite a connection between downsizing and decluttering in terms of divorce. So don't forget that you have the power to create meaningful and positive change in your life. You don't have to do it alone. We have your back. Thanks for watching and see you next week.